where they strung up a man, whom they say he murdered 3. Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Chris James. I'm looking for one of the original Art Bell coffee cups, the ones sold back when he first retired from the show. They were black stoneware, shaped like a barrel, with white lettering and a white interior. They said Coast to Coast in big white letters and Art Bell in small letters across the bottom. My cat broke mine, and I managed to knock my other cup off of the shelf, and now I am without. If you have one and you're willing to part with it, let me know. You can contact me at strangethings@arcanasa.com. The cup looks like this here, and I'd really appreciate getting another one. Art Bell coffee cups make coffee taste better. It takes a lot to make Organic Man Coffee Trike coffee taste better, being the best coffee on earth. Swing by 4501 McPherson and grab a cup or two. If it's too far to drive, you can go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. I remember that day well. Me and my brother used to talk about it for years after the event. I was 5 and he was 7. We were sitting in the living room watching TV. Kennedy was in Dallas, and for unknown reasons, we were not in school. It was a Friday, and we were both home and watching TV. Back then, kids were encouraged to go outside and play and stay away from the house until it was dinner time. Well, neither of us was all that wowed by Kennedy, and seeing as he was in town, well, we were watching. Suddenly, things got weird. A Secret Service guy just won was running to the president's car. People were all diving to the ground. The reporter was saying something about the president had been shot. The car sped out of view. Our mother began to cry. We both hoped it wasn't something we had done or that we were about to be blamed for. We got sent outside to go play or something like that. We talked about what we had seen that day, November 22nd, 1963, every once in a while. Not everybody gets to watch their president getting shot live on TV. There's just one problem with our memory. Kennedy's drive through Dallas and Dealey Plaza was not broadcast on the news. The first broadcast of the Zapruder film was on a late night TV show called Underground News with Chuck Collins, broadcast out of Chicago in 1970, 7 years later. Over the years, I've talked to several other people who swore they watched Kennedy being shot in Dallas in 63. It was years before the term Mandela effect was created. The term Mandela effect was first coined in 2009 by Fiona Broom when she created a website to detail her observations of the phenomenon. Broom was at a conference talking with other people about how she remembered the former South African president, Nelson Mandela, dying in a South African prison in the 80s. And Nelson Mandela did not die in the 80s, nor in prison. He passed away in 2013. As Broom began talking to other people about her memories, she learned that she was not alone. Others remembered seeing news coverage of his death as well as a speech by his widow. I remember seeing a news article. It was on the front page of our local news. This makes me wonder what me and a lot of other people had seen in 1963. What was it Art Bell, actually it was Ross Mitchell Brown, would say during the show? Want to take a ride? If you listen to Art Bell and now you're listening to me, that sounds kind of weird. I'm nothing like Art Bell. If you like strange things, you have an open mind. The sheeple wait for the government or some news anchor to tell them what to think or what to believe. A lot of conspiracies go into how the government is doing everything they can to control people's minds. The Montauk Project was trying to control people's mind and travel through time so they could change history, make things better for those in charge at the possible, well, the probable expense of the rest of us. Christopher Garetano was on the show September 30th, 2022. He worked for 10 years to create the documentary The Montauk Chronicles. His investigation focused on three men who said that they had been brainwashed and forced to take part in experiments at Camp Hero in the 70s and 80s. Garetano also employed a geophysicist who analyzed the ground under the old base, and he found plenty of evidence of large structures that were not recorded on any official map. The folks in charge no longer allow electronic equipment that might show what is under the ground. They say there's nothing there, and you simply have to take their word for it. You know, they would never lie to us. No one in a position of authority is going to allow we, the people, to ever see any evidence of their wrongdoing. It's the golden rule. The guy with all the gold makes all the rules. We can theorize on what might have taken place. It's just as good as all those people who claim the theory of evolution is a real thing. My theory on why me and hundreds of others all believed we watched Kennedy being murdered live on TV. It happened just the way I remember, a live broadcast of Kennedy being shot from the front and to the right of the limousine, causing Kennedy to jerk back and to the left. Picture Kevin Costner speaking when I say this, back and to the left, like in the movie JFK. The actual murderers noticed there was too much evidence showing the president was shot from the area around the grassy knoll and not from the sixth floor of the school book depository. All the folks who had dove for cover were seen pointing to someone up on a small hill behind a fence. The shape of a man standing behind the fence can be seen on some of the photographs taken of the area. He's just slightly visible in a few photos from the incident. Some secret government agent was sent back in time to wave a badge around town and tell the news agencies there was no reason for any of them to have cameras filming Kennedy. Maybe it was for security reasons. History was changed, allowing the conspirators to get away with murder. Like I said, this is just my theory. I've only been looking into November 22nd, 1963 for 20 or 30 years. I've been looking into strange things my whole life. I've read maybe 30 books on the subject of who killed Kennedy. Crossfire by Jim Mars is one of the better ones. Me and Lee by Judith Baker is another. Dr. Mary's Monkey, written by Edward Haslam, on and on. If you find yourself being drawn towards researching the Kennedy assassination, be warned. It's a rabbit hole that once you step into it, you'll never look at our world, especially the government, the same again. I watch just about every documentary on the murder, even the ones that make me yell at the TV, saying, "You guys are a bunch of..." Well, I disagree with their findings, but I still listen to what they have to say, just in case. Who could have wanted Kennedy dead? Oh, there was a lot of people in positions of power, and they were being threatened by his actions. Vice President Johnson was one of the biggest targets on Kennedy's sights. To begin with, Johnson lost his bid to become senator. A former Texas governor, Coke Stevenson, won by 210 votes in the runoff held August 1949. Out of the blue, a whole bunch of uncounted ballots were found in Jim Wells and Duval counties. History repeating itself? The big problem with these missing votes was the ballots apparently had all been cast in alphabetical order. People had lined up at the polling place and arranged themselves in alphabetical order before casting their votes, all for Johnson. What was it Vizzini, played by Wallace Shawn, kept saying? Inconceivable. Witnesses came forward saying that they had watched votes being counted and they saw that votes for Stevens had been added to Johnson's pile. Coke Stevenson and Texas Ranger Frank Hammer went to Alice, the Jim Wells County seat, and attempted to see their tally sheets. The writing was in blue ink until about halfway down the page, and then it was all in black ink and in the same handwriting. Funny, all those people voting in alphabetical order also all had the same signature. The man, who was the last one to cast a vote the day of the election, swore that there was no one behind him in line. His name was in blue ink. When asked, many of the voters listed in black ink said that they didn't vote in that particular election. A lot of the names in black ink belong to people currently in the cemetery. Johnson won the Senate position by 87 votes. Had Stevenson been allowed to become the senator for Texas, would Kennedy have survived that trip through Dallas? Or would they have found some other way of doing things? Johnson hung out with Georgia Senator Richard Russell, who was a strong advocate of segregation. The Jim Crow laws were slowly being done away with, but a lot of folks in the South and in Washington wanted to keep them in place. Johnson was also a segregationist, but you won't see that in his biography. Kennedy didn't like Johnson, and he didn't trust the man. The only reason Johnson was on the ticket was the big party bosses said that Kennedy needed the Southern vote to win. Johnson was in tight with all of the overly corrupt officials, since birds of a feather and all. As the 1964 election was coming up, Johnson was being removed from the ballot. He would no longer have a position of power in Washington, and the long arm of the law was reaching out for him. Someone, the names have been withdrawn by those wishing to stay out of prison, was planning to take out Fidel Castro and John Kennedy. This was not for the sake of the country, but for the folks holding on to power and becoming rich. An ex Marine named Thomas Arthur Vallée had been posted in Japan at the same base where Oswald had been stationed. Vallée was portrayed as an anti Kennedy fanatic experienced with a rifle. Kennedy was in Chicago on a campaign tour on November 2nd, 1963. He was scheduled to attend the Army Air Force game at Soldiers Field. Plans called for him to arrive at O'Hare at 11 a.m., motorcade down what was then known as Northwest Expressway to the loop. The planned route for the motorcade had a weird bottleneck where the vehicles would have to make extremely slow progress. This just happened to be right where Valet was working. The Secret Service canceled the motorcade at the last second. They had uncovered a plot to shoot the president, and there were three men, besides Valet, taken into custody, who were suddenly released without any explanation. Anyone familiar with the JFK case will see this resemblance. In Dallas, the motorcade was to drive along Main Street into Dealey Plaza. For no known reason, the motorcade took a sharp right hand turn, followed by another even sharper left hand turn, right in front of the book depository. Main Street cuts right through the plaza and joins Elm on the other side of the place. Was this simply shoddy planning by the Secret Service or good planning by those people? 9 of the 28 Secret Service men who were in Dallas with the president that day had spent the night out in local clubs boozing it up until the early hours. Some didn't get back to their rooms until 5 o'clock in the morning. When those 3 to 7 shots rang out, the agents all just stood there like they were hung over or something. As the 3 to 7 shots rang out, the folks dove for cover, all except for the agents, sworn to protect JFK. Many citizens were seen pointing to the fence along the back of the grassy knoll. A few people did say they saw someone, maybe a white male, on the 6th floor. No one actually could identify the suspect. He was just some man standing up there. He was a white man. A call went out to look for a white male, 5'10", 160 pounds, and that was it. That was the whole description. At 12 p.m., Officer Tippit was called to a grocery store to arrest a woman for shoplifting. He placed her in the back of his unit and drove away. There's no record of who this woman was or what became of her. She must have vanished from the back seat between 12 and 12:30. Maybe he gave her a stern warning to not steal any more and then let her go. Yeah, right. Oswald was seen walking away from the book depository at 12:30. He got onto a bus, but the traffic became snarled because of all the vehicles rushing to the scene of the shooting. Oswald got off of the bus and went to get a cab. There was an old woman at the cab that he was about to get into, and he offered to allow her to use the cab instead. The woman refused, allowing Oswald to continue on his way. Think about it. You're fleeing a murder scene, but you don't let that stop you from being courteous. At 12:45, dispatch called Officer Tippit and asked where he was. He gave his location as being in his assigned area. 8 witnesses saw Officer Tippit sitting in his unit 5 miles from where he said he was. His actual position placed him between Dealey Plaza and Oswald's apartment. At 12:54, Tippit answered his dispatcher and said that he was at 8th and Lancaster, a mile south of where he actually was. Tippit then drove to the Top 10 record store a few minutes before 1. The store owner, named Dub Stark, and the clerk, Louis Cartinas, watched Tippit rush into the store to use the telephone. Without completing his call or speaking to the store personnel, Tippit then left, jumped in his squad car, and rushed away heading north on Jefferson Boulevard. A cab driver named Whaley let Oswald off near the corner of Neely and Beckley around 12:54. Oswald then walked the 6 blocks to his rooming house, arriving at about 1 o'clock. This drop off location was within walking distance of Jack Ruby's apartment. There are many stories of these two being acquainted from New Orleans. Oswald was being dropped off at about the same time that Tippett was at the Top 10 record store. Why did the cab drop Oswald off so far from his apartment? The driver could have pulled right up to the front door. The housekeeper, Erlene Roberts, told Secret Service agents she saw Oswald coming into the building. He didn't have on a jacket, and she doesn't remember exactly what he was wearing. While inside his room, Erlene Roberts glanced out the front window and she saw a Dallas police car drive by real slow. As the unit was right in front of the building, the driver honked the horn twice. She told the Warren Commission that the police car was number 107. Tippett's car was number 10. If this car was not Tippett's, then whose car was it? All the Dallas police cars were accounted for their location that day. Officer Tippett was driving along the street looking for a suspicious looking white male when he spotted Lee Harvey Oswald walking along 10th Street. Oswald's enlistment papers say that he was 5'8" and he weighed 135 pounds. In the photos of Oswald, he does not look much bigger. He sure doesn't look like 160 pounds. Officer Tippett had supposedly stopped someone, and this person fired a pistol, hitting the officer with 4 rounds. Of the 4 cartridges found at the scene, 2 were Winchester and 2 were Remington. But of the 4 bullets found in Officer Tippett's body, 3 were Winchester and only 1 was a Remington. The cartridges found at the scene would have come from a semi automatic pistol. And keep that in mind. It comes into play shortly after. Tippett's body was en route to the hospital by the time the other police arrived. A Dallas police officer, Westbrook, found a brown wallet next to where Tippett had fallen. He showed the wallet to FBI agent Barrett. The wallet contained identification, including a driver's license for Lee Harvey Oswald. Okay, now this is just way too convenient. Had Officer Tippett stopped to question Oswald and Oswald had removed his wallet to show his ID, would he run away, leaving his wallet laying on the ground? The Texas Theater was the largest suburban movie theater in Dallas, and it was a part of a chain financed by Howard Hughes. It was the first theater in Dallas with air conditioning, which, if you've ever been in Dallas, you'd appreciate air conditioning. Oswald walked to the Texas Theater. The CIA liked to use theaters as contact locations. People can go in at odd hours. It's dark inside, which makes observation difficult. 2 people can sit down next to each other, exchange packages, and then leave. Why do you think Oswald went to see Cry for Battle with Van Heflin immediately after supposedly killing 2 people? Wouldn't it make far more sense to have left town immediately or gone into hiding somewhere? As he went to pay for his theater ticket and popcorn, shouldn't Oswald have noticed, oh shoot, something is missing? He bought a ticket to see the movie and popcorn at 1:15, the exact time the Warren Commission says that Officer Tippett was being killed. How can you be in 2 places at once when you're not anywhere at all? Some of you'll get that. Oswald would have to get his wallet out in order to pay for the ticket and the popcorn. His wallet that mysteriously was being in two locations at once. A theater employee named Burroughs watched Oswald walk down the aisle and take a seat on the main floor. He sat next to a man during the opening credits. Several minutes later, at about 1:20, Oswald then moved across the aisle and sat next to another man. A few minutes later, Davis noticed that he moved again and sat next to a pregnant woman. Just before the police arrived, the pregnant woman went to the balcony and she was never seen again. In addition to Oswald, there were 7 people watching the movie on the main level. Oswald had sat down next to 4 of them, as if looking for someone, maybe his contact. At 1:30, the police received a phone call from someone identifying themselves as working at the Texas Theater. They told the dispatcher a suspicious-looking man just ran into the theater without paying. Oddly enough, none of the folks working at the theater had made the call. None of the people working at any of the stores around the theater had made the call. Nobody knows who called the police. At 1:45 p.m., nearly 15 Dallas police officers converged on the Texas Theater in search of a man who had entered without paying. Isn't that a lot of police officers for such a minor offense? They went in through the front doors and they began to sweep the building. Oswald was spotted in the third seat in the middle of the row of seats. The police converged on the man and they removed him from his seat forcibly. During the scuffle, a revolver was found in Oswald's pocket. A revolver, not a semi-auto. Bernie Hare of Bernie's Hobby House, 2 doors east of the theater, went outside when he saw these police cars. When he couldn't see what was happening because of the crowd, he went to the alley out back. It was also full of police cars. Outside the rear door, he witnessed what he thought for decades was the arrest of Oswald. The police brought a young white man out, put him in a police car, and drove off. Oswald was taken out the front door of the theater. Reporters were taking pictures of everyone and everything in and around Dealey Plaza. In one photo, there are 3 men that no one can identify. The Dallas Morning News, the Dallas Times-Herald, and the Fort Worth Star-Telegram photographed 3 transients under police escort near the Texas School Book Depository shortly after the assassination. The men became known as the 3 Tramps. In 1974, assassination researchers compared photographs of these men to people that they believed to be suspects involved in the conspiracy. And they said that 2 of these men were also Watergate burglars, E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis. Watergate? A lot of y'all have no idea what that was all about. Brace yourselves, this is going to be a fast history lesson. Richard Milhous Nixon was vice president from 1953 to 1961 under President Dwight D. Eisenhower. When Cuba was taken over by Castro and his forces, Eisenhower was told that the communists were getting too close for comfort. February 16, 1959, Castro was sworn in as Prime Minister of Cuba. In April, he visited the U.S., but President Eisenhower refused to meet with him. Instead, Vice President Richard Nixon was sent, whom Castro absolutely did not like. The military wanted Castro out. Eisenhower told Nixon to deal with it. Nixon began making plans to remove, either by disgracing or killing, Castro. The plans were bizarre, if not interesting. Poisoned cigars, venereal diseases. Someone on a rooftop with a rifle. Jacobson Rubenstein worked as a minor CIA operative. He was told to buy 3 handguns and then smuggle them into Cuba to be used against Castro. Who was Jacob Rubenstein, you may ask? He went by the name Jack Ruby. One of these pistols that he bought would later wind up in Dallas police station being fired into the lone gunman. Nixon ran for president against Kennedy in 1961. Nixon was very popular because of his connections with Eisenhower. He might have won if not for Martin Luther King Sr. In August 1960, Martin Luther King Jr. was arrested after he participated in an October sit in highlighting how the 1960s presidential election campaign had ignored civil rights. The authorities released everyone involved over the next few days except for King. Judge Oscar Mitchell sentenced King to 4 months hard labor in a Georgia state prison. Coretta King called Richard Nixon asking him to intercede on her husband's behalf. Nixon and King were friends. And not close friends, but they were allies in the same political party. It starts with R. And Nixon, being a politician, worried if he went to bat for a black man, this might hurt his affiliation with Southern white voters. He twiddled his thumbs and did nothing. Coretta was beside herself, worrying about her husband. She knew her husband would never get out of prison alive. Those Kennedys were talking big about civil rights. She had to do something, so she called John Kennedy and asked him to help get Martin out of prison. John F. Kennedy called and spoke to the governor of Georgia. He told him, "Look, you're a Democrat and I'm a Democrat." He pointed out that they were both on the same side, well, the same party. The pressure from Kennedy and others paved the effective release of Kennedy, who got out of prison 2 days later. King's father, Martin Luther King Sr., a member of the Republican Party in the South, decided to openly endorse Kennedy as the candidate for president in the November 8th election. And Kennedy won by a few votes. And Nixon was not happy no longer being in Washington. He ran around the country trying to sabotage Kennedy's presidency. Nixon was in Dallas on November 20th, telling the newspapers that Kennedy was afraid of the folks in Texas and that he would ride around with a bulletproof cover on his car, which the presidential limousine had a bulletproof bubble that could go over the top of the car. Kennedy had to Kennedy had the cover removed to show that he was not afraid of the people of Texas. Oops. Nixon finally got into the White House in 1970. He was afraid that Castro was going to tell the world that he, Nixon, was trying to kill him, Castro, which he was. Nixon had some close aides, E. Howard Hunt and Frank Sturgis, amongst others, break into the Democrats' office at the Watergate Hotel and search for any documents from Cuba. They also broke into the Brazilian embassy for the same reason. When nothing could be found, Nixon sent them back to look again, and they all got caught. The news did a little digging, and in 1974, Nixon resigned as president. And then Ford stepped right in the middle of it by exonerating him of all crimes. If Nixon was not a crook like he said he wasn't, "I am not a crook," then what crimes did he need to be exonerated of? Am I the only one who thinks it's kind of odd that the guys arrested for breaking into the Watergate Hotel were also arrested in Dallas November 22nd, 1963? All those involved in Watergate were either officers or assets of the intelligence services. Let's get back to Dallas, 1963. Oswald was arrested in the Texas Theater for murdering Officer Tippit. They searched him and they found a revolver and a wallet with Oswald's driver's license and an ID that said Alec Heidel. Wait a minute, wasn't Oswald's wallet found at the scene of the murder of Officer Tippit? Who the heck was Alec Heidel? The ID card is rumored to have been placed in the wallet after the arrest. No one is saying how the wallet was able to be in two places at once, or whether the ID had been made by Oswald or maybe some agency that goes by its initials. I've done a lot of reading, and in one book, the rifle found on the sixth floor was not an Italian piece of junk. Dallas Sheriff Roger Craig stated in the Mark Lane documentary the rifle found in amongst the boxes on the sixth floor of the Texas Book Depository was a 7.65 Mauser. Captain Will Fritz was holding it up by its strap, and several officers could be seen looking at it. Suddenly, as if by magic, this rifle turned into a Mannlicher Carcano, which looks nothing like a Mauser, and it's a piece of junk. Even the Italians say it's a piece of junk. The original story was Oswald fired two bullets, hitting Kennedy with one and Governor McConnell with the other. The detectives on the sixth floor recovered just two bullet cases. This matched with what was evident at the hospital. Kennedy was hit in the back and Connolly was hit as well. Why do I keep calling him McConnell? It was Conley. A Dallas car salesman, James Tague, was late for a lunch date when he was caught in traffic in Dealey Plaza. Seconds after Teague got out of his car, shots were fired into the presidential limousine. A bullet hit the curb near Tague, exploding debris into his face. When the folks calling the shots instead of investigating heard there was now a third bullet, they had to quickly find the third empty cartridge. The detective that found the two empty cases found a third in his pocket, where he'd placed it right after finding the first two. This is something out of a sitcom, really. The evidence record showed that he logged in two empty cell cases, but the two was then turned into a three. If you look at it, you can easily see it looks more like a two than a three. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to see it. The curb hit by bullet number three was jackhammered into rubble and carted off and then replaced. There was a second rifle, or would it be a third, found near the plaza. A Johnson semi-automatic 30-06 rifle that was apparently found in Dealey Plaza soon after the shooting. The documents strongly linked this rifle to two men who are suspected of being involved in the assassination, Lorne Hall and Jerry Patrick Hemming. Richard Hathcock, who lived in California, had kept this rifle in his office for a long time. The day after the assassination, an FBI agent questioned him about the weapon. Amongst other things, the agent wanted to know if Hathcock had an employee named Roy Payne. Hathcock said, "It is my opinion that the reason the FBI agent wants to see Mr. Payne was because Payne's fingerprints undoubtedly are all over that rifle from his having handled it many times. It's also my opinion that unless that particular rifle had been found near the scene of the crime, or in some way involved in this whole thing, the FBI would have no interest in it." This same rifle had been used in a CIA connected anti Castro raid in Cuba. Roy Payne said that Lorne Hall and an unidentified Hispanic man took the weapon from Payne about a week before the assassination. Hall's associate, Jerry Hemming, is known to have been in Dallas on the day of the shooting, and Hall himself had told Hathcock 5 days prior to the assassination that he had to catch a flight to Dallas. In 1975, a maintenance man named Morgan was working on the roof of the County Records building on Dealey Plaza. It's right across the street from the book depository. He found a 30-06 shell casing laying under the lip of the roofing tar at the base of the parapet on the side facing the plaza. The casing had an odd crimping around its neck. This crimping is found in frangible bullets. Frangible bullets are intended to disintegrate into tiny particles upon impacting to minimize their penetration of other objects. In other words, the bullet won't pass right through the subject. It also makes finding the round impossible. Dallas policeman J.W. Foster, who was positioned on top of the triple underpass, saw a bullet strike the grass on the south side of Elm Street near a manhole cover, about 350 feet from the book depository. He reported this to his supervisor, who instructed him to guard the area until the lab people could come by. Well, the lab people were trained officers. They didn't have CSI units back then. Journalists and bystanders watched an unidentified, blond haired man in a suit show an ID to the officer before bending down as if to pick something up. The man left right after, not saying anything to anyone. The officer said that this blond man had Secret Service credentials and said that he was there to recover any evidence. The police contacted the Secret Service asking about the bullet, and they were told there were no Secret Service agents on the ground after the shooting. A group of police officers were examining an area at the side of the street where the president had been hit, and a police inspector found another bullet in the grass. This adds up to 5 rounds in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd. There's no way that Oswald could have fired that many bullets in short time officially documented. All these extra bullets kind of vanished into unknown pockets. Let's take a look at that rifle just a little more. When I was young, you could walk into just about any department store and see rifles right out in the aisles on shelves. You could pick them up and look them over. You could sight them in on the ceiling. Just don't go aiming them at the cashiers or people around you. But you could just pick a rifle up off the shelf at Sears or Ward's or any place like that. Oswald is supposed to have ordered a rifle, a piece of crap rifle at that, from a catalog. He left work, supposedly, to buy lunch and walked to the post office where he bought a money order. Louis Fieldcott told the FBI that rifle number C2766 was sold to the Klein's uh, Armory on June 18, 1962. At Klein's did not order the rifle until January 24, 1963. The rifle was received 6 months before it was ordered. Lee Harvey Oswald left his job at Jager's Child's Stovall during the morning of March 12th, walked 11 blocks to the downtown post office, purchased a postal money order in the alias of Alec Heidel. Instead of mailing the order from the post office where he bought the money order, Oswald walked several blocks and put the envelope in a mailbox on the other side of the Trinity River. In order for this letter to reach Chicago the following day, it would have to have been picked up by a mail carrier sometime at 10:30, delivered to the Industrial Station Post Office in Zone 7, sorted and bagged into an airmail pouch. The airmail pouch would have to have been delivered to another mail carrier, taken to Love Field, and placed aboard an aircraft before 12 o'clock. That's 1.5 hours for all of that to happen. Company time records show that Oswald never left his job. He'd worked continuously from 8 a.m. until 12:15 p.m. on 9 different print jobs. FBI records show on November 23rd, 7:55 p.m., Secret Agent Grimes was told that a $21.45 money order had been located in Washington, D.C. by Robert Jackson, an employee of the National Archives. Why would an employee of the National Archives have access to archives of U.S. postal records on a Saturday evening? How is it possible that a never deposited, never cashed U.S. postal money order could be deposited at the First National Bank in Chicago, routed through the Federal Reserve Bank, and then sent to the postal facility for storage to be found when it could be used to incriminate Oswald? The check showed no cancellation stamps, no deposit marks, and no record of ever being sent to the National Archives. Just look at any canceled check that you've gotten from the bank. Those things are covered with stamp marks and dates and signatures, initials of other people. Why was this unpaid money order found at the U.S. Postal Facility in Arlington, Virginia, and not at the U.S. Postal Office in Kansas City, where all other paid money orders that Oswald had purchased from Dallas Post Office were being stored? This $21.45 money order was never cashed, never deposited, never routed through the Federal Reserve Bank system. The only way this could have happened is this money order was taken from a stack of new money orders sometime after November 22nd from the Dallas post office by someone wanting to prove Oswald was the lone gunman. U.S. Postal Inspector Harry Holmes was a longtime FBI informant, and he was identified by the Bureau as being Dallas T2. Holmes was likely the person who date stamped the money order March 12th, 1962, and it was then sent directly to the FBI headquarters. The serial numbers on this money order indicate that it was pulled from a stack of new money orders at the Dallas post office in late 1963. All of this makes the FBI look as if they were trying to, I don't know, frame Oswald as being a patsy, just like he said to the reporters after he'd been arrested. Why order a rifle through the mail using money orders when you can just pay cash at a store? To create a paper trail? Lots of evidence of guilt to be waved before the public's eyes so they won't ask who's the man behind the curtain? The FBI Chicago office sent 3 agents to Klein's at 10 p.m. the evening of November 22nd. Waldman was on hand to assist in their search. These agents were to search Klein's records, which were stored on microfilm, and determine the name and address of the person who purchased serial number C2766 from them in 1962. 7 hours later, 5 a.m. in the morning, the FBI agents advised Waldman they had found records relating to C2766, and they asked if they could take the microfilm. Waldman agreed, and the FBI agents left with their evidence. The FBI never produced a single document that shows the date C2766 was delivered to Klein's, nor the identity and address of the person who purchased that rifle. All original records from the Crescent Arms and the Klein microfilm disappeared while the FBI had them. Only photographs of the documents were given to the Warren Commission, which were later sent to the National Archives. Waldman testified that Klein's received Oswald's money order of 2145 on March 13th, 1963. It was deposited along with other money orders at the First National Bank of Chicago. The postmark date of the money order leaving Dallas was March 12th. The envelope had to have been picked up, sorted, placed in a box en route to Chicago, received, opened, sorted again, sent to the bank, all in 24 hours. This is back when anything ordered would take weeks, sometimes months before you got your order. Everything was done by hand. There were no computers. Let's see some more bizarre things about this. The bank deposit slip provided by the bank at the time of the transfer reads February 15th, 1963, not March 13th. This is about a month before Oswald is supposed to have sent the coupon for the rifle. In the February date is correct, then the rifle with serial number C2766 could not be the rifle in the so-called backyard photograph showing Oswald holding a newspaper so that you can see the date and the rifle. His wife, Marina, said that she was the one that took this photo. She later recanted her story, saying that the FBI threatened to deport her and her children if she did not go along with their story. The FBI investigation said that Crescent Arms had sold the Mannlicher Carcano rifle to Klein Sporting Goods for $12.78. Klein turned around and sold the same rifle with a scope to Oswald for $21.45. The FBI, after checking gun and sporting goods shops in and around Dallas and Fort Worth, were unable to determine where and when Oswald had purchased the 6.5 millimeter ammo for the rifle. When you buy a gun, it does not come with bullets. You have to buy those separately. There's some people out there don't know that. There's some people out there don't know which end of the barrel the bullet comes out of. I'm not talking to them. Anyway, the FBI determined that the ammo had been manufactured by Western Cartridge Corporation of East Alton, Illinois. The company manufactured 4 million rounds of this ammunition for the U.S. Marine Corps back in 1954. But this ammunition did not fit and could not be used in any Marine Corps weapons. An FBI memo dated December 2nd, 1963 states, this gives rise to the obvious speculation that it is a contract for ammunition placed by the CIA with Western under the USMC cover for concealment purposes. During his autopsy, Oswald had no residue from firing a rifle. You cannot fire a rifle without getting gunpowder on you. It's impossible. When I come from the range, even after washing my hands, I will still have some residue on parts of my body. There were no fingerprints on the rifle, even though Oswald was not seen wearing gloves. There was one fingerprint found, but it was not on the rifle. The police found a print on one of the boxes by the windows on the 6th floor. The print went uninvestigated since, well, they already had their man. Malcolm Everett, Mac Wallace, was born October 15th, 1921. He was an economist for the United States Department of Agriculture. Mac Wallace had been a Marine marksman who was discharged after being injured in a fall. While studying for his Ph.D. at the University of North Carolina, Edward Clark introduced Wallace to Lyndon Johnson. They hit it off, and Johnson began arranging for government jobs for Wallace. Johnson's sister, Josepha, was having an affair with a John Kinser, Kinser. Kinser. After Josepha confided details of Lyndon Johnson's wrongdoings, his illegal activity, Kinser decided that this would be a good opportunity to try blackmailing LBJ. This resulted in what was probably Wallace's first hit on behalf of Johnson. October 22nd, 1951, Wallace shot Kinser several times but failed to escape unnoticed. He was arrested and tried and found guilty. Come here, you. My cat keeps changing things on my computer. Anyway, he was found guilty, but due to one juror refusing to agree to the death penalty, and then the judge had some issues as well, Wallace walked away with a 5-year suspended sentence for murder. Jurors later came forward and they said that they were afraid. They had received threats to their livelihood and to their lives if they were to find Wallace guilty. Wallace was represented at the trial by John Cofer, who was a longtime lawyer that worked for Lyndon Johnson. He had represented LBJ during his contested election to the United States Senate in 1948. There she is again. The fingerprint of LBJ's personal hitman, Malcolm Wallace, was found on a cardboard box on the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository. It's the only print other than Lee Harvey Oswald's prints that could have been found there. Now, Oswald worked in the building. Maybe that's why his prints were there. A lot of people think that they were simply planted. Johnson's mistress of 21 years, Madeline Duncan Brown, said that Johnson told her on the eve of the assassination, "After tomorrow, those blankety blank Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's not a threat, that's a promise." As the presidential motorcade pulled into Dealey Plaza, and as Vice President Johnson's car made the 120-degree turn onto Elm Street, Lyndon Johnson was on the floor of his car before the first shot was fired. It was almost as if he knew it was time to duck, just in case a shot went astray. There is photographic evidence that proves this. The rifle found on the 6th floor also had a 4.18 power scope. If you buy a rifle with a scope, the first thing you do is you sight it in. Otherwise, there's no telling where the bullets are going to go. When the FBI got the rifle to Washington, the gun experts had to put shims, that's strips of metal, under the scope in order to get it to line up. You don't buy 1 or 2 bullets from a store. You have to buy a whole box. When Oswald's apartment was searched, they found no ammo, no gun cleaning kit, no pistol ammo either. Nothing a person would need to take care of any firearms. The day after the assassination, Saturday the 23rd, gunsmith Dial Ryder found an undated repair ticket on his workbench at the Irving Sports Shop. The repair ticket had notations: drill and tap, $4.50, bore sight, $1.50, total work, $6. Work required to mount a scope. The name Oswald appeared on the ticket, but the ticket was undated and didn't have a complete name, nor an address, nor a phone number. No one at the store remembers anyone bringing a rifle to have a scope mounted on it, or anyone that looked like Oswald ever having been in the place. FBI agent Emory Horton contacted and interviewed Ryder at his home in Irving. It had never been determined how the FBI knew to send an agent to visit Ryder. Horton showed Ryder photographs of the C-2766 Mannlicher Carcano and photographs of Oswald. Ryder told Agent Horton that he did not remember Oswald and he definitely had never worked on an Italian rifle. Ryder told the agent he had a repair ticket with the name Oswald and notations for drilling and tapping and bore sighting. To the best of his memory, Ryder said this work had been performed between November 1st and November 15th at the sporting shop, but that no Italian rifle had been involved. A postal employee recognized the name Oswald when he was arrested and having a post office box at the terminal annex. The box was registered to Alec Heidel, not to Oswald. The employee looked and found the paperwork and gave the information to a postal inspector. The information on the postal box was forwarded to the Secret Service. The idea that Oswald was the lone gunman is just beyond believability. At least 5, if not 7 rounds were fired from different locations. Oswald was seen on the second floor lunchroom by a police officer right after the shooting had stopped. The naysayers claimed that Oswald simply ran down the stairs from the 6th floor. There were 2 women standing at the window in the staircase during the whole incident. They both swore under oath that no one, not Oswald or anyone else, had come down the stairs while they were standing there watching Kennedy drive by. The Warren Commission simply ignored their testimony. Why did Officer Tippit need to be murdered? 2 reasons. 1, he knew Oswald. They had been seen around Dallas having coffee together on several occasions. Tippit was supposed to get Oswald out of Dallas by way of the airport. David Ferry was a pilot who also knew Oswald from his time in the Civil Air Patrol. His job was to fly Oswald out of Dallas. When Oswald was arrested, Ferry simply left without him. Reason number 2 Tippit needed to be murdered. There was no way to connect Oswald to Kennedy unless someone were to find his wallet at the murder scene, his wallet that he still had on him when he was arrested. Why was the Warren Commission in such a hurry to frame Oswald? Johnson told Chief Justice Warren the Russians did it. Does that sound like something out of 2021? The Russians did it. If the citizens found out it was those Ruskies, there would be World War III. The entire commission was led by the nose by Allen Dulles, who had been fired by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs fiasco. Dulles had no love, not even any like, of Kennedy, and he had no interest in finding out who done it, especially if maybe his name might have been on the list. Now here's the important part. You can't believe the government, and there's no reason to believe me. Read. Read books. Real books, not computer-generated articles. Those in charge are constantly changing history. Go look for and consume books that give both sides of the story and then make up your own mind. See what actually makes sense, what actually adds up. What doesn't make any sense? What doesn't add up? That's your job for the anytime you choose to pick it up if you decide you want to do it. If you choose to accept this assignment, anyway. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, tell your neighbors, tell your friends, tell other people they should be listening. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit that share button. Send it to people all over the world. Until next Saturday, this is Chris James for Strange Things.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man who they say he murdered 3? Strange things have happened there. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.